and welcome to this NDTV special edition from Davos. I'm joined today by Smriti Irani, she's part of Team India, delegation of 4 cabinet ministers at Davos. And Ms. Irani, what's it been like? What's the big message you're bringing from India to Davos?
I think that it is relevant to highlight what the 4 ministers represent about the Indian economy and about Prime Minister Modi's agenda. We have in this delegation Mansukh Mandavia, Minister Health, who has served as Minister Shipping and Ports as well, who has had a stint in the road network responsibility in our country in the Ministry of Transport, who is also serving the fertilizer interests of the country. Then you have Minister R.K. Singh, who is leading the delegation, reflecting the Prime Minister's resolve on renewables and the green growth segment, which is the buzzword here at Davos. You have Ashwini Vaishnav, who represents not only railways and the expanse of the infrastructure possibility there, but also is representative of the digital transformation story of India. And then there's me. I think that we in totality represent the ethos that at the altar of reform and growth, you do not have to sacrifice inclusivity. But I think potentially what is most significant in the conversation here is that India has made an economic case for gender justice, that we do not look at gender from a perspective of when they use the term emancipation, empowerment, it gives an indication as though women are waiting for a handout. I think Prime Minister Modi has made a case very strongly that when you invest in women-led development, you invest in a stronger economy, you invest in a stronger purpose to fuel your country's healthcare sector, your country's education sector, because it's been historically proved that when a woman's purchasing power or consumption power involves a scale, then she tends to spend more of her money on these 2 important segments. So I think it's been fascinating to see that India Pavilion, India story is setting the Davos grounds on fire, no matter the snow-capped mountains that we are surrounded by.
No, and I think it's actually really interesting to have the Minister of Women and Child. You know,
I think this is the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in the 3 odd decades of the summit, that the Minister Gender has come to Davos. That's never happened. But I also think that if you reflect on the G20 agenda of the Indian presidency, you will realize that for the first time, even at the table of G20, women-led development has become central. It is not at the sidelines of that engagement as well. And I think that is the political and administrative legacy, even at the world stage, of Narendra Modi.
No, it's. I think the fact that it's really mainstream and centered. And what's been interesting is, of course, when you're in India, and I'm sure this is true for you and me, that we get caught up in the daily politics and the nitty-gritty. When you come here, it's all about the India story. I mean, you've seen different states coming together on that.
Yes, I think that you mustn't have missed in the promenade the exhilarating presence of India, the dominating presence of India. There are some state chalets who are displaying the state's potential and prowess, but we need to recognize that, let's say, if an investor of global dominance comes to a particular state and does not percolate their interests well, or does not have a good return on their investment, it is not that state or that particular investment entity that will fail or bear the burden of that failure. It is the India dream that will take a hit. So there is consensus that though there are states who have taken an individual investment a dialogue or platform with many global investors, ultimately they all converge under one flag, which is India.
No, and I think the interesting bit is, I mean, we talk about the India story and, you know, India being the bright spot of where the largest economy, the biggest growth rate at the moment compared to Europe and other countries. But how do we make sure, I mean, that's a great opportunity, but it's a great challenge as well. How do we make sure that these promises and hype becomes truth?
I think that first you need to recognize what seems to be the hype. Is the India story hype? No. And I've had the privilege of being a young global leader denoted by the World Economic Forum. That was in the year 2015. What preceded that? That you had a regime which indicated to the world that, one, there was no political decisive behavior when it came to policy making or reform. Second, you had an air of despondency because there was leakages which were initiated, which were deliberate in the treasury system. You had an unstable political environment where people are pulling at territorial legacies or territorial needs politically because of a coalition government. So the regime change necessitated opportunity to bring forth the Indian potential. So let me give you a small example. What was our economy to be based on? Modi said, let's base it on skill. And he created the first ever skills ministry, which is an amalgam of all segments of our economy, and they're not only entry level skills, but if you're looking at competing global economies, what are those skill sets which will make us accelerate our manufacturing processes? He identified a partnership between business and administration, and that's why the sector skills councils were set up. He also came to political office not by a thin margin, but he came decisively into office. And that gave him the strength to bring about a lot of reform, not only on a policy level, but also on an institutional level from the perspective of spend. For instance, many a times you must have heard, let's say, empowerment of women and social restructuring and welfare spend. Modi strategize that into social investment. For instance, he spoke about let's build toilets for women. And that was not a glamorous political statement to make from the ramparts of the Red Fort, but there was a multiplier effect of that one statement. One, I remember I was Minister Education then. He said, let's build toilets for girls in every school. We built it, not alone, we built it as a coalition of states, and this was one of the best examples of cooperative federalism. In 1 year, we got done what did not happen in 7 decades in our country. But then he took it larger. He said, let's build toilets for every individual household, especially for women. And I remember that in the year 2013, there was a World Bank report which said that if you do not take care of the sanitation needs of a population as big as India, you are creating a 6% negative impact on the Indian GDP. So while he was looking at a larger social context of saying let's bring dignity to the life of especially the poorest of the poor women, he also was addressing an economic issue.
The huge impact on
yes,
GDP
but he
contribution.
also subconsciously impacted how businesses were then viewed, how businesses then operated, because suddenly it became a company issue. People started asking, do you have that clean toilet for women professionals in your company? So when you look at, let's say, Narendra Modi's reform agenda, you can't afford to be myopic because, as I said, it had a multiplier effect.
And it's a whole, but I just want to ask you that, because do you think domestic politics or coalition politics is relevant on the global stage as such when you're here pitching? Because in fact, the opposition would argue that the growth rate, even in a coalition government under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, it was better than the growth rate under Prime Minister Modi.
What is your debt to GDP ratio then? 10 years ago it was 78.
What is it now? You got the numbers and everything.
It's around 52.
So you think the numbers, the data backs your argument?
After the pandemic, when resources were constrained, when supply chains was choked, when opportunities also were restricted, can you imagine that is the position you're in after 10 years?
No, it's absolutely.
Secondly, I think that how do you translate growth to the reality of a common citizen? I spoke about, let's say, the sanitation one effort. I'm just saying it's one effort. While let's look at the larger issue at hand. While you were talking about the Manmohan Singh government, the issue of, again, let me correlate it to sanitation. Preceding that World Bank report, there was a report in 2012 which says 40% of crime against women happened when women went out to defecate.
Yes, that was a huge problem.
If you remember that.
Yes.
Now, when Modi came and addressed this sanitation issue, was it a part of the political manifesto? Look back, it was not. But he recognized that by solving that one problem, what are the problems that he solved? One, the law and order issue for women personally who are subjected to sexual violence. Second, you look at the GDP impact because of lack of sanitation. Third, you impact women's personal health. Fourth, you also impact, I think, tourism, because that was one of the negatives when it came to tourism, especially on the larger scale.
All right.
Fifth, what did you then also in some way address? Dropouts of young girls in school, because the minute they started their menstrual hygiene processes in life, they were dropping out for the lack of toilets. Sixth, what did he address? He is the first Prime Minister to give us a menstrual hygiene protocol for administration. Can you imagine that? In 7 decades, our administration never had a menstrual hygiene protocol for disposal of menstrual waste.
It's absolutely fantastic actually to hear ministers talking about this, because they're really
I think that
daily life
maybe,
issues for women and young
I'm
girls.
saying that maybe you look at it from a social perspective. Let me give you an economic perspective to it. He's the first Prime Minister to speak, and I'm not talking about his gender, not man, woman. We've had a female Prime Minister. He's the first Prime Minister to stand at the ramparts of the Red Fort and say, listen, we have made 1 rupee sanitary napkins available. Could you ever imagine that of Manmohan Singh? No. And what is that reflective of? He did create a system. Jan Aushadhi Kendra may have looked to some as a non-glamorous initiative, not worthy of a headline. But imagine the price of stents coming down, price of knee replacement surgeries coming down. There are 40 medical products only for female hygiene and health and Jan Aushadhi Kendra.
No, I said what I wanted to ask also, because you were during the earlier government one of the most vocal advocates really for women's rights. When there was any incident, you would be the first one to talk about it. But after you've become minister, you've gone silent. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Why?
I haven't spoken to NDTV.
No, but even
But I believe there's a regime change here now.
we haven't changed, but there's a Lakshman Rekha.
No, I think I can confess it, and if you don't edit it, this confession will be available to everybody. I took a principled stand of not engaging with your channel because I felt that there was a narrative that was being purposefully run against Prime Minister Modi. I do not think we ever profess that we live in a utopian state, but I think that we have to agree that Prime Minister Modi has driven decisively many issues of change in the country. Let me give you another example. And as women, we have discussed this, that again, if you look at reports, we had a McKinsey report which said that one of the greatest challenges for female enterprise is the lack of access to credit. And when Prime Minister Modi came to government in 2014, he orchestrated the Jan Dhan Yojana. Now for many, it was like, why would you just look at, and you remember, there were those so-called political financial stalwarts who were busy fighting with each other when they were in power, but somehow scoffed at Modi's intervention. But let's look at what the intervention did. And people at Davos are flabbergasted with the result. And I believe, Sonia, that leadership is not about only firefighting in the present. It is to also create an opportunity to address challenges of the future with solutions that you can start designing now. In 14, Prime Minister Modi says, let's bank the unbanked. 440 million bank accounts open, of which 220 million were women. Now, when you talk about access to credit, and especially in a business atmosphere, you need to necessitate an engagement with a financial institution. Then he began, and I'm giving you a circle of what he's done. Then he began, after Jan Dhan, he began Mudra. That was not a gendered financial service.
No, but in fact what I was asking, and I think Prime Minister Modi has also said this, is that each government has built and built dramatically in different cases depending on what, because you had Aadhaar.
So let me say this, is India happy with incremental change? Is the question Modi addressed.
No, and I suppose that
you are an eager nation, and everybody that I met in Davos, I said, listen, we are competitive, but we have a collaborative spirit. Why? Everybody now, after the disruption called COVID, says, why localize? Prime Minister Modi spoke about Make in India, not because of a pandemic. He spoke about Make in India because it creates more opportunities for Indians to deliver solutions, manufacturing and otherwise, to one of the largest markets in the world. It would be foolish for me to think that I have the largest consumption capacity in the world. I have a deliberate purchasing power which is quite significant given the expanse of my populace. Out of a 700 million population which is literate, 600 million are in the workforce in some category or the other.
No, but just
why would not I as a nation create an opportunity, a supply chain which may be servicing a global conglomerate, but at the same time when panic hits, when challenges come, that supply chain
is not broken
and will never be strategically choked for geopolitical reasons.
In fact, no, but I was actually asking you about you as minister, and that's what I was coming, that even today while we're here, I'm already seeing that the Congress is attacking you and taking out all videos saying that why don't you speak when crimes happen against women now?
Do you think that I firstly would speak only because the Congress wants me to speak or not speak? But can you imagine the desperation of the country's so-called oldest political organization? Can you imagine the deep sense of hurt and agitation? Oh my God, she defeated Rahul Gandhi. Can I just find one tweet, one photograph, one video to whack her with every day? I say bring it on. But would I waste productive time at Davos to discuss Congress, or would I want to discuss issues related to women and children and I think the population as a whole? Because why is it incumbent upon female ministers to only talk about women?
Well, no, you are women
So
and child minister.
let me look at issues. I'm also Minister Minority. Let me look it out. And I've served as Minister Education. I was privileged that the Prime Minister deemed it fit that I create the foundation of engagement for the new education policy,
Yes.
which for 30 years was not changed. And now Prime Minister Modi has brought forth an education policy which for the first time has a gender inclusion fund. Question is, the Congress was in power, why didn't it do it?
No,
Second issue, and let me address
Sure.
even the law and order issue. In 2013, and I then was in opposition, I've spoken on issues like POXO, I've spoken on issues like sexual harassment at workplace, I've spoken for stringent rape laws, and yes, you take out my speeches from there, and yes, I've spoken, but I'm also part of a government that's addressed the security challenge for women. Why? And I can say this decisively today, because the Congress party pronounced the Nirbhaya Fund in 2013, did not spend one penny out of it. In 2014, when Modi came to power, he said activate the funding pattern for women and children, especially protection of women and young girls in the country. And let me tell you, 9,000 crores worth of projects, these 9,000 crore rupees came from the central fund, not a single state fund, evaluated, brought together center and state and interministerial collaborations. We paid up to 6,000 crores for safety and security of women. And let me tell you which all levels have we addressed it. Prime Minister Modi set up the One-Stop Crisis Center in 703 districts, which bring together on one roof. We have police help, legal help, medical help, and a short stay home. We have 35 helplines for women in the country run by the funds of the Government of India. Every police station has a women's help desk paid for by the Government of India. Every big city and the CCTV network there is paid for by Government of India, especially the dark spots, which make it vulnerable for women to travel or for women to even undertake any economic or social activity. Apart from that, short stay homes other than these are all funded by the government.
You do a reality check with us on those and how they're functioning?
Yeah, of course, because once we give you the infrastructure money, we hand it over to the states to run it. But what we today can very, very firmly say that in all these operations, we have today an amalgamated service of 220 million women who've been helped.
I wanted to ask also, as women and child minister specifically, one big issue at Davos has been how COVID has impacted women, how women have dropped out of the workforce, and in India where there was so much part of the informal labor force, they've been hit very badly.
Three things. I've had the privilege of speaking to the New York office of the UN Women, and when we first engaged with them, I said, can you give me the data? They said it's a supposition.
So you mean there's no data to prove that women have been
told them,
impacted?
I said, would you please give me data on exactly where you thought what kind of problem erupted, because for governance to respond to the challenge, you need to first identify the challenge. There was not much information forthcoming. They said it's a supposition, it's a fear that we have expressed. I said, fine, that fear becomes narrative then. And then becomes a governance engagement of back and forth with the media. They said, who said? Can you give me the specifics? Now let me give you a broader term.
What has your experience?
So let me give you a broader term. Let me give you a broader term, and I think that I can supplement this with industry data. And I was on a panel with Chandra of Tata Sons, and one of the greatest fears when the pandemic hit was people will starve in India. 800 million people for the past 2.5 years have doorstep delivery of free food, digitally identified at the doorstep. We in the ministry run a tracker for 120 million beneficiary women and children below the age of 6. Apart from the ration that is given, we supplement it with additional nutrition. And of this, 30 million women who are pregnant receive cash transfers. Apart from the other cash transfers that 220 million women received, we gave 30 million pregnant women more cash, so that they can get vaccinated, get medical checkups, and institutional deliveries can increase. These are not numbers which are suppositions. These are hardcore numbers because this is transferred, digitally identified directly. Then, when you look at the vaccine cost,
right,
If you look at market value of 600 rupees per dose and a family size of 4 and one person needing 3 doses because the booster is included, that is 1800 rupees per person in a family. Just multiply it by 4 or 5 in the family.
So what for you?
So what did Chandra see? And you can just cross match that with him because I heard it from the horse's mouth. He says, my product line is seeing a fueling of consumption from tier 4 cities. And what is the work ethic, let's say, that Narendra Modi institutionalized? Congress can say, oh, we did Manrega. How did Narendra Modi address the issue of Manrega? He says, can we stop digging ditches and build capital assets? So the Pradhan Mantri Garib Rozgar Yojana became, he enhanced the outlays for Manrega. The person man days, they still call it, but the man days increased by 500 million. 52 to 53% of the offtake was by women.
No, and
this is all identified, not because Modi says
and
so.
And also building local...
No, and the billing happens by states. You think states are lying, including Congress states?
All states can lie, but I'm not saying that at all.
And I tell you why it's becoming tougher to lie.
Because it's
fiscally, because it's all digital.
No, but I just wanted to ask, because you are also, of course, Minister for Minority Affairs, and while you were here, the Prime Minister said at the National Executive that it's...
Well, since I was not in receipt of his verbal communication directly, I cannot suppose to what he spoke. And since you were not there yourself.
No, but what has been reported, say, by all media...
Well, not everything
and has not been denied, has not been denied by the BJP media head or anybody of the sort.
I'm sitting here, but I will take whatever you say.
But do you agree with the sentiment that the Prime Minister said that the BJP must now make an outreach to minorities, not for electoral gains was his point, but the outreach to minorities was the headline?
Has Prime Minister ever reached out to anybody with a sense of or a purpose of gain?
Why did he feel the need to say this?
He's never reached out to any community with a purpose of gaining. Has he even exemplified, I'm belonging to a particular community, a particular class within a community, and hence look at this and explore the possibility of propagating that facet? No. He belongs to the poorest of the poor families. He has never ever said, look at my caste and vote for me. As Prime Minister and as leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, it is incumbent upon him we continue to convey that we serve not only those who voted for us, we also serve those who did not vote for us. When Prime Minister Modi says, let me build highways, does he say only those who voted for BJP can drive a car on that highway?
Do you think that now, and because of course you are also from the entertainment industry, another remark, another statement as the Prime Minister was from the entertainment industry was that now suddenly there are all these that how he said that the government is working day and night, extremely hard work, but suddenly a remark will come up about a film or something which diverts attention. Do you agree with that? With the super censorship?
Again, I am not party to receiving his comments directly, hence would
Your
be
view.
most inappropriate to reflect on something I have not heard directly.
No, so
but let me just say this, when we are in government, we are agnostic to a particular PR machinery. We have to recognize, and Prime Minister Modi does recognize, that this is a free market where everybody, according to their perceptions, their tastes, or their likes or dislikes, will engage with a particular product, entertainment or otherwise, a particular entity, entertainment or otherwise, particular persona, entertainment or otherwise. What is incumbent upon us is to continue to establish the rule of law. Though law and order is a state issue, however, in the dignity of the constitutional post that we hold and the leadership that we imbibe and the leadership that we live in the reflected glory of, it is our responsibility to ensure that we keep up the oath to the Constitution.
I think that's a very important point.
That is exactly what Prime Minister Modi may have alluded to, again with Raida. I haven't heard him say.
I was asking
but
you, yes.
Let me give you a flip side to every conversation. There is one. There are very strong likes and dislikes. Is a strong like or dislike attributed to only a particular political hue? Is strong likes and dislikes only attributed to a particular political ideology? And I say so as somebody who's had 2 decades of experience in the media.
Absolutely.
How many media personalities can today very strongly get up and say, I'm a right-winger and get funds? How many media personalities can today get up and say, I have a story to tell, and then not get trashed because they're not left enough? So let's not discuss only one facet, let's discuss things on a holistic fashion. But why will I divorce myself from that conversation? Because I'm in a constitutional position. When I go back into that segment, I can speak as a creative mind. But right now, like I said, I live in the reflected glory of the Prime Minister, and hence I will repeat, it is my constitutional responsibility to ensure law and order is maintained, the dignity of my office is maintained.
So the strategic Smriti Irani, it was great to have you here and to interview you, and I think you really are one of the most articulate voices for the India story here at Davos. Thanks so much.
I'm proud to be one of the voices. I think what is a takeaway from Davos, we've had people from different political backgrounds here, have different political constituencies when we go back home, but there is a recognition that we all need to succeed as Indians here together.
Absolutely.
Because one failure of one entity will be written off as the Indian failure.
No,
so we are here basking in the glory of the fact that we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We are here because people in Davos have recognized that when their backs were to the wall, we did not commercially exploit the pandemic, that we serviced the pharmacological needs of 150 countries, and that we grew. Prime Minister Modi undertook the reform agenda while the pandemic agenda was being unleashed in terms of solutions in the country. That makes for a very proud Indian sitting in front of you.
Thank you, Smriti Irani. Thank you for speaking to NDTV.
Thank you.